Welcome to Voices of Adoption, where we share unique perspectives, actionable advice, and meaningful stories of birth parents, adoptees, adoptive families, and other members of the adoption community. I'm Donna Pope, Executive Director of Heart to Heart Adoptions.
And I'm Nathan Gwilliam, founder and former CEO of Adoption.com.
Together, we've been part of thousands of adoption journeys over the past 25 years, and we're so glad you're here.
Let's begin today's conversation.
Welcome to Voices of Adoptions. I'm Donna Pope, and we've got here Lena Livinsky. And Lena is a podcaster, a host, a storyteller, and a reflective voice exploring identity, healing, and lived experiences through honest conversation. And I've listened to some of your podcasts and loved the honest conversations.
Oh, thank you. That makes sense.
And she's created, and this is where her name comes in. She's the creator and the host of Livin'sky Podcast, where she invites meaningful dialogue around personal growth. She holds a space for vulnerability and depth and encourages conversation that honor complexity rather than the surface level narratives. One of her most important things is how to work with children in some of their eating habits. But I just recently listened to your podcast on some of the challenges you've had and chosen to take on with some of your eating. And I'd love to get into that a little bit.
Oh, definitely. We can talk about that. Yeah, great.
So I asked Lena before, how does somebody who addresses issues with eating fit with someone that's doing an adoption podcast? Tell us a little bit about what you said.
Yeah. So, I think an adoption process is so beautiful. Being able to connect with a child in such a meaningful way, give them a home, give them so much love, where otherwise perhaps they wouldn't have had, that kind of a life. Who knows? There's many different reasons why people adopt, but I think it's such an honorable and kind thing to do. And hopefully more kids who need a home are able to go through that process. But I was saying how, when a parent adopts a child, they don't get to go through the same kind of feeding process that a birth mom would, because they cannot breastfeed. And not every birth mother chooses to do that or is able to do that, because there is a lot of complexity behind breastfeeding for some moms. And I know, because I struggled a lot to establish breastfeeding with my son. But I was saying, developmentally, our children go through many different feeding phases. And it starts with the bottle, then we're introducing solids. We're progressing with these solids where the kids are trying more things. They're trying different textures. They're learning how to chew. They're learning how to chew more like an adult. So it's a process. It's a developmental process. And I think sometimes, kids have difficulties with that. And that can apply to any type of child, whether whatever environment they're growing up in. So I think there is a lot of things we can cover there for parents who have whose children are struggling with that.
Well, and I think that that's so true, because I remember when I adopted my children, I was an idiot. Well, I still am. I did. But someone made the statement. They said, well, you've heard the statement that a way of showing love is through food, and especially for men and for boys. Well, I think that's especially true for children. As we're trying to connect to our children, as we're trying to have that bonding experience, using food as a method to making sure it's a good experience. And breastfeeding is a wonderful way to do that. And with, like you said, for most adoptive moms, they don't have the opportunity to breastfeed. Now, there are some that will do that. They will, and there are some birth mothers who are willing to give food,
Amazing
breast milk for the children. But that challenge of, now I've got this cute little baby and I'm taking this child home, and maybe he or she is colicky, or maybe he or she won't eat. How do we start to address some of those challenges?
Yeah. Well, I always look at the child in this very holistic lens. So we always want to look for the root cause of things. And unfortunately, with colics and things like that, we often don't have an answer to it. You'll go to a pediatrician and they say, this is normal. This is just what's going to happen. They're going to get over it. And for some kids, it's just like a quick phase, but for others, they struggle for a long time. So looking at their overall biology, looking at their body, at their nervous system, making sure that, physiologically everything is going well, I think is important here. So, because if we keep the child kind of going with this discomfort for a long time, it can create aversion issues with food later on. And if something's happening where they're not swallowing correctly, or something's going on with their feeding where there is any type of issues, and kids tend to, they're very smart. So they're going to develop these fears around food. So for me, kind of looking at the child from this lens of, okay, I'm going to zoom out. We're having this issue right now, but we're going to zoom out and look at this child more holistically. So we're looking at, their biology, any type of symptoms there, their balanced health. So what is happening? Are they in pain? Are they constipated? What is happening with the child in this lens? We're looking at their oral motor skills. Maybe maybe there's too much air that they're swallowing. So we got to look at that. We got to look at if there's any type of issue going on there. We kind of look at their gut as it's developing. They're so delicate. Maybe we're introducing things too quickly. Maybe something's causing discomfort. Maybe they're having allergic reactions to things. There could be a lot of things going on there. And then just how much food are we really offering them? Like, what is the environment like when they're eating? Are they soothing? Are they stressed out because there's so much noise when they're eating? And there's just different things we want to look at to see what could really be driving these issues with the child.
One of the stories you tell, we address some of those things when they're young, and then they start maybe going through the bottle feeding phase, and then they're now starting to introduce new foods to them. You tell a story, and I thought it was such a sweet story, how you had tried so hard to prepare a good meal for your son, and you put all your love and all your care into preparing this meal. And every mother recognizes that we do this, and you come out and you watch his face, and you hope it's going to be, oh, Mom, this looks so good. Well, it wasn't. And you said on his face there was fear. That was an interesting word. Usually we think of our children, I don't like this, and a bit of rebellion and a bit of irritation, but there was fear. Address what you learned from that.
Yes. Well, I always go back to this moment, and there were many moments like that, but maybe before I didn't pay as close attention to this, to the way his body was really reacting, because I was focusing so much about him being fed and my stress around the meal preparation and just trying to get him to have good food and eat. But I remember that moment because it really opened up my eyes to thinking about him and his feeding issues, his picky eating in this holistic lens. And I've been studying holistic healing for so long because of my own health issues. So I've been reading about it and studying and researching and trying all these different things and focusing on healing myself, thinking about, because I had these overt symptoms of autoimmune issues and things like that, and always thinking about it. But I didn't think about my son in that lens, especially when it came to picky eating. I kind of just looked at it as a symptom, not as a symptom, but kind of like as a thing, as a phase he's going to grow out of. And then in that moment, when I saw fear in his face, it kind of clicked for me when I was like, well, what? Wait, why is he afraid? Like, what is really going on here? So I started to kind of like zoom out and look at how stressed he was, because he was probably afraid of my reaction, because my fuse might have been a little bit short back then. He was probably afraid maybe of disappointing me, or maybe that I would make him eat it, and I never forced him to eat, because that would just go against everything I believe in. And when it comes to feeding a child, just because I think when we force, we actually create more problems than we help. So that was the moment when I started to think about this. Like, if I want to heal myself in this whole child or whole person, biology informed way, I need to look at him in the same way. And that's when I started to notice these things. I started to connect with him more, and I started to notice, like, oh, he's having these symptoms too. This is something that's been going on. I did gut testing with him, and I started to look at things from this very different perspective, and things started to shift pretty quickly for him once I did.
See, it's so interesting because in the world of adoption, there's a lot of complexity when it comes to this. We don't even think about it. We think, oh, I'm going to get this kid and I'm going to take good care and he's going to be fine. And um, but in the world of adoption, first of all, the child has already probably gone through a bit of a trauma. We think that the separation from the biological parents is innately traumatic.
Yeah.
There also may be drugs involved that now he's got to deal with. There may be some health problems that now he's got to deal with. Even more so, a child that may be adopted from the foster care system or a child that's adopted internationally. Some of these things create a complexity to eating that we don't really consider. We don't even think about how complex some of this might be. So, in thinking through that, what might be some guidelines you would give to parents in addressing these issues?
Yeah. Well, I always start with connection because I have my framework called the Bloom framework, and we can go over that. But at the root of that, because I imagine that framework kind of like a tree, like a blooming tree, and at the root of it is connection. Because when we connect with the child, especially a child who, it's kind of new to us, right? Is this new beautiful member of our family? We have to get to know them. We have to get to know as much about that child as possible, whether we have that information from the agency, whether we have contact with the birth parent. I think that varies, right? So we might not know a full story, maybe specifically if it's international. I don't really know. But so if we don't have that information, I mean, if we do, it's amazing because we can get to know their history, maybe their health history a little bit and stuff like that. But, that's when we really need to think about this even more, this connection piece of connecting, observing, watching. Is anything triggering reactions? Is there something that's making them uncomfortable? I don't know, maybe the door being open, does that startle them? Should they be eating in an environment that's super quiet? Or maybe they like the noise. Maybe they get soothed by the noise. My son did. I used to run like the hood range for him because he loved that as a baby. So it depends, I think, on the child so much. But when we zoom out and when we start to observe them and look at them and their little reactions, because their body can tell us so much. Like 87%, no, 93% of our communication comes from our body language. So they're not able to tell us, but we're able to see a lot of it. So that's what I would do. I would just zoom out, look at this connection piece so then we can look for clues. And it, of course, depends on the age because I think kids are, babies and kids are all adopted at different ages. So sometimes they can tell us some things, but sometimes they can't. But depending on that, our feeding situation is going to look a little bit different, right? Whether they're eating solids, whether they're eating at the dinner table with us, whether they're in our arms when we're feeding them, it all looks a little bit different. But I would really strive for that connection and moments of just awareness and moments of togetherness before meals to help them regulate. Because like you said, a lot of them do have trauma. And I think having a person who they can attach with and that cares for them deeply, that is so important. Because when we're eating, we want to feel safe, right? Because it's so invasive. We're literally letting our guard down. We're sitting down, we're taking bites, we're letting things in our mouth, we're swallowing it. It's a whole process. So we're in this vulnerable state. So we need to feel safe. So that's the first thing I would say to the family, just like really work on that connection.
Talk with us a little bit about your Bloom methodology, BLOOM. Talk with us about that.
Yes. So that's my framework that I use for my picky eating clients, but it's really for feeding clients in general. Stands for balanced health. So we look at the child from this holistic lens where we look at these 5 different areas. So be is balanced health. We look at their medical history. We look at any type of medical symptoms. We look at any type of issues that could be causing appetite problems, pain during eating, anything that would influence them to be uncomfortable or stressed during eating, or just that is causing medical issues. So sometimes, that's more important to address than eating first. So even things like respiration, right? Because this is our most important body function. Without respiration, we can't live. Food comes second. So things like that. We got to look at their body to make sure that they're ready to eat. If there's anything out of balance, we want to address that. Then L is learned oral motor skills or motor skills. So that looks at their mouth muscles. It looks at their jaw strength. It looks at their chewing abilities. It looks at them being able to break down the food safely and swallow it safely, because swallowing is a big part of that as well. As a speech pathologist, that's in my background. We look at safe swallowing. So wanting to make sure that they're not aspirating any food, making sure that they're swallowing safely and they're able to chew anything safely. So really looking at those skills. Then the first O is optimal microbiome. Because our gut-brain connection is so strong, we know this. A lot of our neurotransmitters are actually created in the gut. And then those send messages to the brain. So our serotonin is created in the gut. This is our feel-good chemical. We want to feel good when we're eating. Many different chemicals are there, neurotransmitters are there that are going to influence how we feel. And also when our microbiome is out of balance, when there is an overgrowth of different bacteria, the bad bacteria in our gut, that's going to influence our choices with food as well, because we're going to have cravings for kind of carbs and sugars and things like that. So this is what a lot of kids unfortunately struggle with. This is often why their palates or their repertoire gets very small. So they're going to have this beige diet. They're going to ask for cookies every chance they get, all these snacks, because that's what they're craving. The second O is open exploration. So that is making sure that the environment they have is really supportive of them to explore food in a safe way, right? We talked about safety, how important that is to our kids when they're eating. So that means things like maybe preparing foods together, not pressuring them to eat, but still having this environment when they're able to learn about food and eventually try food. And the last area, M, is mealtime boundaries. So boundaries are extremely important for kids. They thrive with boundaries. They need to be told kind of what's expected of them. So for those picky eaters who are maybe in the open exploration phase, but they're kind of pushing it where maybe they could be trying some things, but they're not, we want to set those boundaries in terms of what's expected of them that is appropriate for the child. So that's the blue framework that I use. I always look at these little areas to see what's out of balance so that we can address it in this lens.
So I've noticed on your website, you actually can let people take a quiz. They can take a quiz to look at how, they might help their child a little bit better. And then you help them come up with a roadmap to help this child.
Yes.
No, that's great, because the last thing in the world we want to do in creating an attachment with the child is have this big old fight about food at mealtime. That is just not what we want to have happen.
No, absolutely not. And picky eating is becoming more and more prevalent. So I think it's definitely having these resources to see like how can we really connect with my child and what we should work on first, I think is so important.
Okay, so we'll make sure that we put on in there how to get your thing so that you can read those options. I want to switch just a little bit on how we're working with our children to talking about you and how you worked with yourself. Now, you have had an amazing year. You talk about that. One of the things is you've lost 50 pounds.
I did.
Okay, tell us a little bit about how that happened. Some people that may be listening may be interested in how all that came about.
Yeah. Well, it was a long time coming for me because I struggled with losing weight for a long time. because I think it was because of hormonal issues. And it started really around the time I had a miscarriage. So that was in 2019. I had a miscarriage, and I noticed after that, my body changed to a point where no matter what I did, even though I wasn't very overweight at that point, I was probably like 15 pounds over my goal weight or 20 pounds. So it wasn't something where I was concerned very much. Of course, I wanted to lose weight, but no matter what I did, nothing would come off. No weight would come off. And I did things even like going to Orange Theory. And I don't know if you're familiar with that studio, but that's very intensive workouts. Very intensive. 3 times a week, I would go and try to beat everybody's score, just give it my all, and not even 1 pound came off. So I was like, okay, well, something is really wrong here. And in hindsight, I was probably just exhausting myself going there. It was probably not good for my health and my hormones in general, but that's what I did. And at that time, I was also vegan. So being vegan for me personally was actually very bad for my health because it completely stripped me of my nutrients. It completely stripped me of what I needed personally. And by testing myself later, I knew. But at the time, I thought I was doing the right thing, even though the type of diet I was holding or I was having was not like a healthy vegan. It was kind of like, oh, I have a hamburger substitute. Oh, I have this. And even though I was eating all these vegetables, like I was not very healthy. So sometimes I think about whether that contributed to the miscarriage. I'm not sure, but it was a trying time. So after I went off of that diet in 2020, I was able to get a little bit healthier and stronger. I was feeling really good. And then I got pregnant with my son, and my pregnancy was amazing. It was really pretty easygoing. Maybe the first trimester was a little bit hard, but my autoimmune psoriasis that was very visible. I mean, it was not strong, but it was kind of mild before I got pregnant, but it all went away and I was feeling amazing, like $1 million. And then I gave birth and it was just a very different story. I gave birth and it felt like everything I had to give to create this beautiful life was just taken away from me. All the nutrients, all the minerals, I was just depleted so severely. And the psoriasis came back with a vengeance in areas I have never seen it. I have never had it. I was just so mortified, and I was just so sad. I was devastated because I didn't know what to do. Because here I have this little baby who's not sleeping. I had postpartum depression. I was dealing with that for a very long time. Felt like my emotions were also gone. Everything just felt flat to me. Everything felt uninteresting to me. The baby blues. And then I had all this weight that I had put on, weight that I have never had before in my life. And, I was nursing. I nursed my son for 2 years and 3 months. So for a long time. But at that point I said to myself, like, I can't do this anymore. I need to start rebuilding my body a little bit. I need to start nurturing it more because, everything I was doing was for him, and nursing is very strenuous on your body as well. So I needed to do that. And once I weaned him off, I worked with an FDNP who was amazing. She was phenomenal. And she taught me how to balance my meals, and she taught me how to do all these incredible things for my body and take the supplements that I needed. And I started to feel a little bit better, but the weight still was not moving. No matter what I did, it was not moving. So a year later, February last year, I started to learn more. Well, I started to learn more about it before I started a diet. I started a diet called the GAPS diet in February of 2025. So that was really gut oriented. The whole purpose of it was to work on gut health. I don't know if you're familiar with that diet.
I'm not. Please tell us what GAP means.
Yeah. So it's the GAPS diet. It stands for Gut and Psychology Syndrome. So it was developed by Dr. Natasha, I think McBride. I don't want to butcher her last name, but it's definitely Dr. Natasha. who's Russian. So everything that, because I'm Polish originally, so everything that she kind of like talked about, a lot of it rang like really close to my heart because of the way the foods were prepared with the fermented foods and the meat soups and everything like that. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give this a try because I grew up this way as well. My grandparents believed this as well. So I decided to give it a try. And the backbone of this entire diet is a meat stock soup. So it's not a bone broth. It's a meat stock soup because bone broth, which in order to get a bone broth, you have to cook it for at least 8 hours. So you have to cook it up to 24 hours. So it is amazing for your body, but only if you don't have gut issues because it's hard to digest. So meat stock, because it's cooked much shorter, usually like 2 hours, an hour and a half, maybe 2.5. It's easier to digest and it serves a lot of, it's very nutrient dense, right? So it has all these vitamins and minerals and amino acids, and it is just so nutrient dense that it is very healing for the gut itself. So if you have any type of leaky gut, the whole purpose is to stay on this diet, which has a limited items of food you can have on it. It really eliminates carbs and sugars. So it's supposed to starve out the bad bacteria and feed the good.
There you go.
Yeah. So I went on this diet and immediately I started seeing results. Like it's like the weight started to literally melt off of me. It was quite amazing because actually I didn't do this because I wanted to lose weight. Of course, in the back of my mind, I did. But at that point, I had reached kind of a moment in my life where I wasn't obsessing about it anymore. I did as a younger woman, but then when I had my son, I started to look at my body very differently. So I was like, okay, well, this is kind of great. But then I had different fungal things that started to go away almost immediately. But the biggest thing I noticed within a week and a half, it was my emotions came back. It was amazing. I started to feel emotions again. It was kind of like I started to feel like really high and really lows. And I was like, oh my goodness, well, look at this. And it was so quick. So I stayed on that diet for about 6 months, and now I'm still doing the meat stock. I'm still doing some of these things because I'm still working on healing the skin issues, which is going well. But I also went lectin free at an advice of an incredible person who actually, Mary Reddick, who has I learned about GAPS from her. Just because we're living in such a toxic environment right now where most of our guts are compromised, but the mucosal level is also compromised in our gut. And in order to heal it, the diet itself is no longer just enough. We need to also start to feed our birth microbes. So I started to do that as well. And that's what I've been doing since last year for a year. And it's been life-changing for me, completely life-changing.
One of the challenges for especially adoptive moms is that, even though they may not have given birth to the child, there's a lot that goes on to having a child
Oh my gosh.
going through that. And sometimes taking care of themselves goes last on the plate, and they don't. And so you would advise that they do, that they take care of themselves.
I love this analysis of when you're on a plane, right? This is what they tell you. Put on your oxygen mask first, then help your child. Because if you don't do that, then you're going to be running on empty, and that's the only thing you're going to be able to offer. And I know because I lived it for a long time. And my experience with motherhood was very different for the first 2 years of my son's life versus to what it is after. It was very different.
Primarily because of just what you were eating.
I think it was more nuanced than that. I think because of the gut issues I already had and the postpartum depression, which was so strong, and my son was not sleeping well. I did not sleep for like 2 years. And I don't want to sound so extreme, but on a good night, he would wake up 3 times and on a bad night, 18. So it was just a lot going on. So I think it was a mixture of everything. It was like the perfect storm happened.
but now he's sleeping better, and you're now able to sleep better. And
Yes.
sometimes we forget how difficult that is. I remember when my son finally slept through 6 hours, and I woke up and I thought, I have been asleep for 6 hours. This is amazing.
It's like you're born again. It's amazing. It's the best feeling.
So, what other advice would you give to adoptive parents that are taking in new children and helping them to grow, particularly in these areas of taking care of themselves and taking care of their children?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's okay to take a moment or take a day or go on a date night, go and do something for yourself, go out shopping. And even if the child is wanting to be with you, because I have a child who's very, very attached to me, I know the feeling. It's okay to do that because they're going to find ways that to do things that make them excited and make them happy. And you're going to come back refreshed and feeling so much better. So I think again, going back to this kind of analogy of like putting on your oxygen mask first is just so important for us to do. And that could look in many different ways, right? Maybe you don't have the delivery or you don't have the opportunity to go somewhere without your child right now. That's okay. So maybe when they're down for a nap, instead of scrolling on your phone, which is so easy to do, but unfortunately that does not help to regulate our nervous system, maybe go take a bath or go take a shower, or I don't know, have your child sleep in a stroller and go for a walk, go outside, get some sun, because that is so regulating to the body. So it's just looking for these little moments in your day that are able to give you something to give you more power and to give you more energy to go through the day. I think it's so important for moms and for dads too, because we just get so, our lives become this kind of perfect mix of our needs and our child's needs, but our child needs are the most important. So it used to be just you taking care of you, but that is really dwindling down to the lowest kind of step on the ladder. So it's important for us to remember that we are still a person, we still have needs. And when we do take care of some of these needs, maybe not all of them, but at least some of them, that's going to make us a better parent.
So, kind of in conclusion, I think about my kids and I think how much I feel like I just don't know how to feed them anymore. Now they're adults now, and so they can feed themselves. But this whole idea of using food and meal times as a connective time rather than a battle um, for, I don't know, you've got to eat that kind of thing. The whole idea of you're going to sit here until you eat those lima beans. Do you think that's a good strategy?
I don't. And I think a lot of it stems from our childhood, the way we grew up. Not every household was like that, but a lot of them were, because if we think about where our grandparents came from, where our parents came from, a lot of them lived through war and scarcity, and all these lessons that they grew up with were very much so about, you need to eat this because maybe kids in whatever the country is that they name, they don't have any food, so you have to eat it. You're going to be, this is when you eat your whole plate, that means you're healthy. And there's a lot of these lessons that we kind of hear growing up that sometimes if we don't start to kind of analyze them a little bit, we're going to bring to the table with us. So I think it's important to think about this, like, where did I get this from? Because I think I always say this, quality is so much more important than quantity, right? If your child ate a little bit less, that's okay, because it's really about the experience. They're not going to starve themselves. And it also doesn't mean that they should eat like 2 bites of chicken so they can have a snack. No, like the expectation is, because we're going to set boundaries, right? This is dinner, this is what you're having, and this is what we're going to have in a very loving way. but it's important for them to get to know their body. It's important to them to get to know their body signals and to know, like, I'm feeling full, I'm feeling this in my body. It's so important for them to honor those feelings. And I think when we tell them, like, no, you got to eat all the lima beans, that kind of gets in the way of their own body signals. And it gets in the way of us being able to have this nurturing experience at the table.
A nurturing experience at the table. That seems like something that we should strive for. Doesn't always happen.
Oh, not even at my house. Oh my gosh. I'm like the worst person to look at.
But that would be kind of a goal.
That is the goal. I really think it's a goal for kids to have this healthy relationship with food and to explore at their own pace that feels good in their body, because a lot of them have different experiences. They're going to taste things differently than us, and they have different sensory needs. So every child is so different, and your first versus your second versus your third, it's also a different story. But I think if we zoom out and just try and give them a good environment to eat, that's really the first step.
Yeah. Lena, thank you so much for visiting with us. And I hope that some of the things that you said, we don't often think about those. We when we're involved in adoption, we're thinking about so many of the other things. But when it comes right down to having this nurturing experience, particularly around food, that's something we need to strive for. So thank you for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you. It was such an honor to be here.
Thank you for listening to Voices of Adoption. I'm Donna Pope.
And I'm Nathan Gwilliam. Every voice in the adoption triad deserves to be heard and understood.
Visit voicesofadoption.org to subscribe and access additional resources. And then join us next time as we continue to build bridges through conversation.